This is Tiger Cats pregame presented by Greenworks. Longtime CFL coach and Tiger Cats broadcaster John Salvanis joins us with his pregame salutations. Coach Sal, always a pleasure, sir. Let me ask you the question that if you were listening to the broadcast, I'm going to throw it to you right now. Now, we've gone through one game of evaluation on a pregame, and obviously I'll change that. We'll start with training camp and evaluation process there. Then there was the first preseason game, and now you look at the roster that's going to play tonight in Montreal, and it is littered with players that I would consider that it's either make it or break it. How do you break down tape and evaluate these guys in this situation a week away from your season opener?
Well, Bob, I think you got to go back to what you talked about in the beginning, and that's you're trying to establish your game day roster. Now, that means here's the breakdown for it. You got 2 quarterbacks on the roster. You got 20 Americans, 4 of which are going to be designated players. You got 21 nationals, and you get 2 global players. So your starting group's got to include 7 nationals. Now, one of the most important decisions they have to make is those 4 guys that are designated players, because those 4 can only play on special teams. And, Andy, you know how important that is. But they also need to be able to fill in for any injured starter. So your evaluation has to take those things into consideration before anything else.
Coach, when you're looking at the roster tonight, the only obvious or projected starters position group is the defensive backs. You have the same starting lineup, except for Tunde Adeleke is starting at free safety as we had last week, and along with Chris Edwards, the Sam linebacker, who in this league is essentially a defensive back as well. What would you read into that, or why would the coaches do that?
Well, first of all, last week, Kat Santonos did a very good job filling in for Adeleke, but Adeleke comes in with, as you say, the projected starters, and that is because of communication. That group, including Edwards at that Sam linebacker, has to be able to communicate all the way through a play. You know, you get a defensive call comes in, and then from that defensive call, when the offense deploys their receivers, they have to make adjustments. Then when the ball snaps, all H breaks loose, and everybody has to be on the same page. So I think that projected group of starters is there to try to get the communication down early in this ball game, and I suspect they'll play a fair amount in the first half, and then they'll be taken out for subs.
Yeah, perhaps as long as the starters for Montreal play around Cody Fajardo, I assume.
Yeah, I agree with that.
What about last week? If you were kind of breaking down the film from last week, or what you saw out there, what impressed you? What areas do you have of concern?
Well, I think you go back to areas of concern. To me, what we have to improve upon as a team from last season to this season, number one is turnovers. And we had 4 turnovers in that ballgame. Yes, we had a lot of different players on. I accept all that. And 2, we have to be better in the fourth quarter. And we were not in either one of those categories. We were 4-3 in the turnovers to Toronto. I think those things have to become much better for this team to improve this year.
Let's jump to the offensive line. Alex Fontana gets the start at center. He was the starting center for the Ticats at the beginning of last year until injury. And next to him, Brandon Revenberg and Coulter Woodmansey, who are projected starters, are in there. But is it safe to say that those 2 will not play too much tonight and give some of the younger players, including some of the draft picks, some time?
Yeah, I agree. They will do that. And really, the O-line with Revenberg and Woodmansey, as you say, they're in for a short time to give Alex Fontana at the center position an opportunity with familiar people next to him. that gives Alex an opportunity. We know that Baird is going to be the starting center, but Alex could, be a very valuable part of that organization. So you want to have those two veteran guys next to him to get him off to a good start. And then I think they take Rev out real early in the ball game, and it would be Black that would come in his position, the number one draft choice, and I expect to see him play a great deal.
We were talking earlier about the backup, the players who are at their position going to be a backup, and let's look at the linebackers, for instance. When you have Jameer Thurman and Simone Lawrence and Kyle Wilson, none of which are playing tonight, you'd assume that those are going to be the three linebackers along with Chris Edwards that are going to be playing the majority of the snaps when it comes regular season. So the players who are playing middle and will linebacker and backing up Chris Edwards tonight, how much of the play on the defensive side of the ball will make a difference in if they make the team or not? And how much will it be focused on what they do on special teams?
Well, I think a great deal will be special teams, but at the same time, you want to see the player not have any breakdowns mentally in terms of the play call and his movement on the field. If he's in the right position at the right time, even though he does not make the play, if he's in the right place at the right time, he's got the opportunity to make the ball club. And again, it goes back to those designated players. There's some four designated guys are just special teams players, and they have to be able to fill in and be good as a starter goes down. They have to be able to come in and play for them. So I think a good deal of the evaluation tonight will be on special teams, but you cannot discount, errors made on the defensive scheme.
If we go to the backs for a second there, Coach, I think there's an interesting situation brewing with the injury to Sean Thomas Erlington being on that 6-game injured list, so I'm going to presume he will not be ready for week number 1 in Winnipeg. You're in an interesting situation where Fleet Davis showed real well as a sort of number 2 back behind James Butler. But I guess this is a big game, I would presume, in his second week of training camp for Keon Edwards, the OUA Player of the Year from Western. Because I would believe having 2 Americans at that position could cause problems, could it not?
Well, it could cause problems, but at the same time, you could designate one of those guys. But I like the idea of Edwards because Edwards is big enough that he could play a tight end position also. So, as a running back per se, you're going to go with the American 9 out of 10 times unless Thomas Erlington comes back, in which case he becomes that a different type of runner in the backfield.
I talked to Andy about this on a human note of what is going to happen tomorrow at 10 o'clock. Tomorrow, the Tiger Cats have to submit their active roster and I guess a practice roster as well, too. And I guess whoever's going to go on the injured list will be determined from there. You've been through this, and Andy talked about it from a player perspective, but from a coach perspective, how difficult is that cut-down day for a head coach or a positional coach?
Well, it is very difficult because as a coach, you're being evaluated as well. If your player that's under your direction doesn't learn, you may be at fault yourself as a coach because if he hasn't learned, you haven't taught properly. So that comes into play into it. And Andy mentioned, the nervousness around the dorm room or whatever. A lot of good players will hear that coach needs to see you, bring your playbook. And that, is the worst thing you can hear. But at the same time, there's a lot of guys that'll be placed onto a practice roster. So, they have to give all of their efforts in this ballgame to make sure they give themselves a good chance.
What position battles are you looking forward to watching tonight most after seeing what happened last week?
Quarterback. I want to see whether it's going to be Powell or Schultz. You're only going to dress 2 quarterbacks, so one of those 2 quarterbacks playing tonight is going to be on the roster, and he'll get a game check, and the other guy is going to end up on the practice roster. And, of course, when you break that down economically, you look at it, what's the starting salary for CFL players? About $70,000. A practice roster player gets $750 a week. So there's a lot to play for right there.
On that note there, and that's important to notice, the NFL made the big change this year where they will be allowed to dress 3 quarterbacks. Is that a better situation that you'd like to see in the Canadian game?
No, I think you're okay with 2 quarterbacks on the active roster. I don't see that as a big issue. A lot of it goes back to the fact that we added those 2 global players, which takes away one of your or 2 of your spots, basically, unless they're more than just a kicker. And Andy mentioned the kickers earlier. Whether Small comes back or not, he doesn't need any practice. He just needs to get in the uniform.
I've talked to a number of media people around the league, Coach, and I don't know if it's pressure building or expectation. I'll use that word. There's a lot of people that are picking the Tiger Cats to finish first in the East. Do you see that? I mean, when you look in your crystal ball, that the Tiger Cats should finish first?
Oh, give me a break, Bubba. You're asking somebody to pick a team when they haven't even played a game yet. No, this is a long 18-game season, and every team has got an opportunity to be number one. I'd love to have the Tiger Cats be number one, but for me to stand here or sit here and try to pick them number one at this time would be kind of foolish.
Coach, we were talking about the injury to Justin McGriff and who's going to fill that void from Stephen Dunbar Jr. last year. Do you suspect that the Tiger Cats are on the horn trying to bring in another bigger body to compete with some of the players that were in camp, or do you think it is actually going to be between Omar Bayless and Godwin and Gallimore and those likes?
Well, you more than likely will start out with the second group that you mentioned on there, but you're always looking for another player. And that brings up an idea that I've had for years, and a couple of old-time coaches adhered to this idea. They would cut down 2 more players than they actually need to cut down in order to bring in a new player from another team. So if you got your eye on a player from BC and he's on the bubble at BC, you make yourself room for that guy to come in. If he doesn't, then you bring back the guy that you let go for a short period of time.
With his pregame salutations, he is John Salavanis. Coach Sal, thank you for joining us as always. Your expertise is certainly always much appreciated.
All right, I'm going to enjoy listening to this ball game.
Hey, thanks, Coach.